This is VOA Africa.
Good evening, I'm Esther Githui-Ewart. It's Wednesday, January 29th. This is Africa 54. The coronavirus outbreak has now spread to at least 18 nations, prompting the United States to call on China to allow more public health experts into the country. Kenya's parliamentary majority leader discusses his government's plans to promote national unity. And investors and entrepreneurs meet in Silicon Valley to discuss funding for African projects. As fear of the coronavirus spreading grips the globe, Kenyan authorities are tightening entry into the country as a precaution against the deadly disease. Officials are especially wary of travelers from China, where the virus originated in the city of Wuhan. All Kenyan airport workers, including immigration and custom officials, are wearing face masks as they process arriving passengers. The increased worry comes after a patient who had traveled from Guangzhou was quarantined at Kenya's National Hospital. Nairobi residents expressed their concern about the virus.
I think the government can do best is they can do the testing. You see the way, what is it called, yellow fever, before people travel to outside countries or they enter into the country, they usually have a certificate for it. They can implement that strategy, and I think it can help.
Not because I've not been following the news, so I cannot say whether Kenya we are ready to deal with the case.
The entire Kenyans to have that safety, to create that safety first. Whenever we have to report if there is any signs that you know your friend. You don't have to panic, but to report it immediately with the relevant authority.
Kenya at the moment says it does not plan to evacuate its citizens from China. Kenya Airways says it is also not suspending its flights to the country at this time. Yassin Abdi Said, a Somali student living in Wuhan, expressed his feelings about the virus via Skype to VOA.
Our situation is calm even though we are indoors, but the situation in Wuhan is very, very dangerous. The city is on lockdown, most shops are closed. Authorities are not allowing anyone to go out or come in. No taxis are operating. Hospitals are receiving a lot of people as the deadly virus is accelerating.
The coronavirus has now spread to more than 18 countries as governments take steps aimed at halting the disease. Chinese President Xi Jinping stressed that his country is ready to work with the international community to halt the virus. VOA's Mariama Diallo has more.
The first cases of this new kind of coronavirus were publicly reported in late December in China. Since then, it has taken weeks for officials to get data on how fast it spreads and who is most vulnerable. Tom Frieden, former director of the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, says they are still figuring out the basics.
So far, it's clear that in terms of infectiousness, it can go from person to person, but we don't know whether that requires a lot of contact or a little contact, and that makes a big difference. In terms of how deadly it is, we know that it's commonly causing pneumonia and that it can cause severe disease or death, but we don't have a sense of whether there are lots of people who have the infection without any symptoms. So there's a lot we don't know.
17 years ago, China struggled to contain the virus that causes SARS and was heavily criticized for withholding critical information. Now, many, including the World Health Organization, say China has improved. They cite China's rapid sharing of the virus's genome sequence, allowing for quick testing.
There are some areas which have shown dramatic improvement in professionalism and transparency, and there have been other areas that have been delinquent, that have been very costly. On the latter, when the cases first appeared in Wuhan, in Hubei province, in December, there was a lag of a couple of weeks reporting.
But the continuing lack of independent news media coverage in the authoritarian country means that even now, there remain questions about how severe the situation is in China.
You probably have noticed that there were like 15 healthcare workers being infected in Wuhan. Well, that is very important because it is an indication, right, of how serious, how dangerous the virus is, because the healthcare workers usually are not that easily right, to be infected. They only reported that after January 20th.
Even inside the country, Chinese officials have been publicly criticized for a sluggish response.
We hope people can understand that the information disclosure has not been timely. When it comes to infectious diseases, we have the Infectious Disease Prevention and Treatment Law, which requires information to be disclosed in accordance with the law. As a local government, we need to get authorization before disclosure.
On Tuesday, the U.S. Health and Human Services Secretary publicly pressed Beijing to open up and allow more public health experts into the country to assist.
But getting WHO, CDC experts on the ground to be able to assist the Chinese experts. In addition, as Dr. Fauci mentioned, the more actual isolates that we can get, actual live isolates we can get, the more robust we can ensure any therapeutics or vaccines would be, more targeted on top of the genetic sequences that has been shared.
The CDC recommends that all travelers avoid all non-essential travel to all of China in response to the outbreak. Mariama Diallo, VOA News, Washington.
To West Africa now, where many commuters and drivers in Nigeria are dismayed after authorities in Lagos announced a ban on commercial motorcycles. The action will affect thousands of commuters and threaten ride-hailing startups. Neka Chile has the story.
Commuters and taxi drivers in Nigeria's notoriously congested business capital, Lagos, have reacted with dismay after authorities announced a ban on commercial motorcycles and three-wheelers across nearly the entire city. Lagos state government said it will ban the taxi bikes known as Okadas and three-wheelers known as Kekes from February 1 because of what it described as the chaos and disorderliness and scary figures on fatal accidents. But for Lagosian commuters like Folari Busun, Okadas and Kekes are essentially for zipping through the thick congestion that bogs down larger vehicles.
It's an easy way to beat traffic. So if they ban them, I don't know what the plan of government is, because whatever the plan is, it's not going to be good enough. It's not going to be good as the bikes and the keke.
And for drivers like Johnson Ikubi, his Mara or tuk-tuk taxi is his livelihood. He says those who are banning the vehicles do not care because they never use them.
It's not easy to get a job. Imagine that I park my camera, where will I get a job? I mean, I'm going to spend a little money I have.
There are an estimated 8 million Okada drivers across the whole of Nigeria, many of them employed by commercial motorcycle companies like Max.ng and GoKada. They've been trying to capitalize on Lagos' congested roads by expanding their operations. Both Max.ng and GoKada raised around $5 million in investment last year. But such companies are included in the ban a Lagos state official had said with only courier services exempted. GoKada founder Fahim Saleh said the decision was disappointing, but he was not sure how it was going to be enforced. Chinedu Azodo, co-founder of Max.ng, said he has not heard directly from the government, but said the ban amounted to a restriction on poor people.
Neka Chile of Reuters with that report. Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta recently launched the Building Bridges Initiative, a report intended to address cyclical election violence. The initiative is the brainchild of Kenyatta and opposition leader Raila Odinga. Aden Duale, the majority leader of Kenya's National Assembly and member of the ruling coalition, Jubilee, spoke with Africa 54 managing editor Vincent Makori about the challenges facing the country.
The politics of Kenya rotates around ethnic mobilization. So those who feel that we must not give chance to a unity of purpose, those are skeptics. But all of us who are in Jubilee agree in principle with the legacy of the President of uniting the country.
my assessment is that this is a very beautiful sounding document, but when you look at the actual structures, they do not lend themselves to a peaceful, united Kenya, because when you look at the election, for example, as one of the things the president said, he wants to make sure they can take place and people still live amicably together. There's no commitment to building the infrastructure that will ensure that. For example, the Electoral Commission and even the judiciary, which is being undermined actually by your own party, Jubilee. How can you guarantee a future?
No, I think the Building Bridges document is just a working document. And let me make it very clear. You can amend the Constitution of the Republic of Kenya in two ways. Either through a referendum, a popular initiative, or through a parliamentary initiative. And this time must be a bipartisan. So we have not reached that stage. And I think when we reach that stage, and every region is coming with its own issues to the BBI document. For the IEBC and for all the other electoral reforms, with or without IEBC, the legislature and the political parties and the key players, the stakeholders, can come together and see what needs to be fixed, whether it is budgetary, whether it is
but that always happens when it's already too late. If I look at...
I agree with you. You know, the critical report says if you want to fix the Electoral Commission, fix it 2 years before the election.
Exactly. But what I saw since the last election is that instead of actually Jubilee, and you have been the leader in Jubilee, instead of focusing on fixing those institutions, you actually focused on the power issue. Who is going to be president? In fact, we've been campaigning since the beginning, since the end of that election. What I see is a campaign for the gentleman who hopes to become the president in 2020.
Kenya is a very unique country in Africa where after every election, people start campaigning for the next election, whether it's Jubilee, whether it's the opposition, the minority. And I think that narrative and that system must be stopped.
But who will change it? In fact, you're one of the foremost campaigners. You're actually a very strong advocate for all these things.
That must change. And that change can come from all of us, not only Honorable Duale. But the difference between us and the minority or the opposition is that we have a social contract with the people of Kenya. With all this BBI and the legacy of the president and the 4 big agenda, we are the ruling coalition. So we have a manifesto, we have a social contract. We must provide water, clean water, health, do the infrastructure. So what the president is now trying to do is that, yes, we have a very divisive elections since 2002. We must bring the people of Kenya together. And for him to succeed in that, he must carry each and every body and every region and every religion and every political shade in our country together. Nobody should be left. So what's happening now, I mean, the BBI report 1, in my opinion, captured 90% of the aspiration of the people of Kenya. And I think they're going back and we'll see what will happen.
But Duale, it is true. This is, sounds really amazing. But what most Kenyans I speak to tell me is the frustration they see with the political class. While you say these things on the platforms, practically, the system only favors the politicians. This is a country where to become an instant millionaire, or you have to become as a member of parliament or a senator. So what are you doing? And you're one of those leaders to ensure that the Kenyans can see that the system is benefiting them rather than being a system of politicians and the elite.
And that's why I agree with you. I think the sentiments of the people of Kenya are valid. Even the BBI, in my opinion, the document that was presented has not cascaded down to the citizens. It's been hijacked by the political class. That I can tell you.
Join us Thursday for part 2 of Aden Duale's interview with Vincent, where he talks about Kenya's fight against corruption and terrorism. We'll be back.
Tell them, say you there. Tell your neighbor, tell them, say you there. Tell them, say you there. This message na for them bad model of them. Would they sit down?
I'm Clara Frank, and here's what's trending. A Tunisian startup has developed a smart device to help beekeepers track their hives and reduce losses. Smart Bee, developed by Iris Technologies, tracks indicators such as temperature, humidity, and quality of bee humming, alerting keepers in real time of any problem. Farmers say theft, climate change, and beehive collapse are among the most serious problems facing beekeepers. The device alerts keepers through messages to their mobile phones. Iris Technologies exports Smart Bee to a number of Arab countries, including Libya and Oman. Next up, the latest way to get fit in Hollywood, a yoga booty ballet class at the Swerve Fitness Studios in West Hollywood. The class combines meditation with cardio, dance, toning ballet techniques, and yoga. The workout starts with a short session of spiritual intention setting meant to balance the body and mind before the music pumps up and participants dance to a high-energy cardio workout. Ballet moves follow to strengthen muscles with a session of hatha yoga to finish off. The technique works the abs, tones, and burns fat. And finally, Shiok Meats, a Singapore-based startup, aims to become the first company in the world to bring shrimp grown in a lab to diners' plates. So-called clean meat, which is genuine meat grown from cells outside the animal, is still at a beginning stage. More than 24 firms are testing lab-grown fish, beef, and chicken, hoping to break into an unproven segment of the alternative meat market, which Barclays estimates could be worth $140 billion by 2029. The cells are fed with nutrients in a solution and kept at a temperature of 28 degrees Celsius, which helps them multiply. Shiok grows minced meat by extracting a sample of cells from shrimp. Cost remains a downside. A single dumpling, typically eaten in a dim sum meal, would cost as much as $300 using Shiok shrimp. And that's what's trending today.
The United Nations Children's Fund is warning that a surge in violence in the Central Sahel region of Africa means nearly 5 million children will need humanitarian assistance this year. That figure is up from 4.3 million. The agency reports that children are being attacked, abducted, or recruited into armed groups due to the spike in conflict and insecurity in Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger. Mali recorded 571 grave violations against children during the first 3 quarters of 2019, compared to 544 in 2018 and 386 in 2017. Access to safe water in Burkina Faso dropped by 10% from 2018 to 2019 across areas where internally displaced people represent more than 1/5 of the population. UNICEF is appealing for $208 million to support its humanitarian response in the Central Sahel for 2020. Militia infighting in the Central African Republic town of Bria last weekend has killed at least 38 people and forced several hundred from their homes. Authorities say the violence was some of the worst since armed groups agreed on a peace deal last February. The agreement was meant to bring stability to a country that has been rocked by violence since 2013, when mainly Muslim rebels in the Seleka alliance ousted former President Francois Bozize, prompting reprisals from mostly Christian militia. Now, members of the U.S. Senate are spending Wednesday asking questions about the issues involved in the impeachment of President Donald Trump. The senators spent parts of 6 days listening to lawmakers from the House of Representatives make a case for convicting the president, while his lawyers argue that Trump did nothing wrong. VOA congressional correspondent Catherine Gibson reports on what's next on Capitol Hill.
President Trump rallying supporters in the state of New Jersey just hours after his legal team closed their defense on Capitol Hill.
Are we having an impeachment proceeding because aid came out 3 weeks before the end of the fiscal year? Or a 6-minute phone call? You boil it down, that's what this is.
The president's lawyers used just half their allotted time, telling senators that Democrats' efforts to impeach are dangerous.
What they are asking you to do is to throw out a successful president on the eve of an election with no basis and in violation of the Constitution. It would dangerously change our country and weaken forever all of our democratic institutions. You all know that's not in the interest of the American people.
But the trial is far from over as pressure builds to call former National Security Advisor John Bolton to testify.
If my Republican colleagues now fail to call witnesses, they are essentially shredding the Constitution and flaunting the law that requires them to hear and see these witnesses. John Bolton was in the room. He was eyes on and ears on the president. He called it a drug deal. He tried to stop it. We need to hear from him. This revelation builds momentum inescapably and indisputably.
Well, just 4 Republican senators need to join with Democrats for that push for witness testimony. Not all Republicans trust what Bolton would say.
John Bolton is a disgruntled, very angry, fired employee who now stands to make millions of dollars with testimony. An important question to John Bolton is, you didn't want to testify a month ago, but now that you're getting millions of dollars for writing a book, you want to testify. What has changed?
Republicans calling for a deal that would bring in their own witnesses, former Vice President Joe Biden and his son Hunter. Democrats argue the Bidens have nothing to do with this impeachment.
If they want a witness for witness, then let them call Mick Mulvaney. Mick Mulvaney has said that he disputes what John Bolton has to say. Let them call Mick Mulvaney. Let them call Secretary Pompeo. Let them call people that are percipient witnesses to this scandal and this corrupt scheme. If they want a witness for witness, but that's not really what they want. They want a distraction, and I don't think the senators want to allow their proceeding to be turned into a circus.
Polling shows a majority of Americans want new evidence and witnesses in the impeachment trial, which gets back underway Wednesday with senators' questions. Catherine Gibson, VOA News, Capitol Hill.
It's time for our technology report, and joining us now is our tech reporter, Paul Ndiho. Paul.
Hello, Esther. Excited to be here. African entrepreneurs, Silicon Valley investors, and others gathered recently in California to talk about the state of entrepreneurship on the African continent and what is needed for businesses to thrive there. Michelle Quinn has our report.
At the Computer History Museum in the heart of Silicon Valley, people gathered recently at the African Diaspora Investment Symposium to talk about the future of Africa business.
In the past, many Africans, and especially people like me from the diaspora, were not invited to the table to really discuss on issues that matter to the continent. So we said, well, what if we can just bring everyone together so we can have that discussion at the same table?
Remittances, money sent by people living in the U.S. to family in Africa, has long been a key way to support the continent, speakers said. But Nagash and others said there are other uses of diaspora funds.
How do we scale remittances so that it can also be invested in other people than our family, supporting startups.
While many investors and businesses want to come to Africa, it can be a challenge to navigate, which is why African nations have been working on the African Continental Free Trade Area, said Joseph Matura, Google's first sub-Saharan African lead and now a minister in the Kenyan government.
How do they, with the different regulations, different countries, be able to get into the continent? So we are providing the platform that they can now use. They come, and as part of the Continental Free Trade Area, they're able to then go to many of the other different markets.
For the roughly 50 African entrepreneurs attending the event, this was an opportunity to pitch their businesses. Abubakar Kamara, an architect from Guinea, is working on a housing startup.
We're implicating people in the process of actually building their homes. We want to change the concept of what is architecture, because architecture has a lot to do with your identity.
Nanik Holis is the chief executive of a sports technology company in South Africa.
We have a smart wearable that is sewn to the garments around the joint ankles of the athletes' garments.
Barbara Burungi Mutabazi runs Uganda Women in Technology, which trains female students and young women for technology jobs like coding.
Yeah, I made some really good connections, especially in terms of fundraising.
And I'm proud to be a second-generation family business leader.
For many of the attendees, the event was a welcome chance to talk about Africa's successes. Thelma Akeyor runs a Nigeria-based business accelerator and an investment fund for women-run businesses.
I think one of the problems that Africa's had for years is we tend not to talk about the progress and the developments that are happening on the continent. So it's been a pleasure to come here and share with people that live here in the valley about the work that we're doing.
The connections made at this event can be long-lasting as people look for ways to be part of the burgeoning African business sector. Michelle Quinn, VOA News, Mountain View, California.
Well, Esther, that's our Take report today. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Paul. All right, be sure to join Paul Ndiho each Wednesday for the latest in technology news. And that's our show for today. Be sure to watch Africa 54 on our website at voaafrica.com. From all of us here in Washington, have a good evening.